In order for us to taste Nibbana, everything we think, everything we say, everything we do, they all need to be pointing towards Nibbana. They must be taking us to Nibbana. Many people say, you see this a lot in texts, in commentaries, in teachings, how the Dhamma is made up of 84,000 teachings. That is not entirely true. There aren't 84,000 teachings that the Buddha taught. But having this or similar statements being made over centuries, and especially the exposure that the Dhamma and Buddhism as such has been getting in the West or around the world at this time, and the variety of teachings that are available from different schools, or even within the Theravada tradition, the vast libraries of suttas and commentaries and sub-commentaries and sub-sub-commentaries, etc., can make us really lose our bearings, or lose, even worse, the heart to persevere, to push forward, to really be and maintain curious, and this curiosity to pursue it further. So, enumerating all these different types of teachings or learning about them, the various theories, principles, concepts, the steps, can cloud the mind sometimes. They can become easily overwhelming. For this, it is crucial to realize, to pause, and to consider that, in fact, Lord Buddha only taught one thing. And he gave the cure to that one thing. He taught the world that there is suffering. He broke it down into its component parts without beating around the bush. And he offered the cure for that suffering. That's it. So we do not need to know all the dhammas out there, because over the course of centuries, people have made up these different schools of thought, within Buddhism. Even they've been incorporated in some cases in chantings, daily chantings, where a practitioner is expected, in a sense, to learn all the various dhammas, perfect them, bring them to completion, etc., in order for that person to taste what Lord Buddha tasted and all the Arya Savakas tasted. We don't need to learn all the dhammas. We don't need to, even the idea of cultivating the paramis, which was a later addition, had nothing to do with the earliest teachings of Lord Buddha. So if you're hungry, you don't need to go to the market, to the store, and buy everything they offer in order for you to satiate yourself. If you're thirsty, drink some water. Drink some water. But the suffering that Lord Buddha talked about is one that constantly escapes us. Constantly escapes us. And what covers up our eyes, veils our vision, obstructing our vision from seeing suffering itself as it is the persistence or the persistent presence of delusion. Delusion. Delusion even convinces one to give up looking for suffering. This is where the mind no longer is investigating enough. It believes hearsay, it believes somebody's statement without having done any kind of work to explore the answer received. Delusion also causes us to lose attention, the wholesome attention, the wise attention that the Buddha talked about as yoniso manasikara. Because it always deviates, it always points our attention to wrong things. Wrong because they do not take us to Nibbana. Plain and simple. And anything that does not take us to Nibbana is keeping us perpetually in suffering. That's it. Anything that doesn't take you to Nibbana is simply keeping you enmeshed in this thick soup of suffering from life to life. But how can we pause? How can we look at our thoughts, for example, or the speech, whether it's internal or external, or our actions, bodily actions, whether they do take us or not to Nibbana? Here's again where we see yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, wise attention come into to view. Because as we are becoming more and more attentive, wisely, we start seeing gaps in the so-called logic that delusion has been throwing in our direction for eons, or just a lifetime. And this we see through the loops, the cycles of suffering that we have been going through, whether it's in the form of relationships, activities that we do. We know they're toxic, but we still are in that loop. And the usual response when a person is asked about that, they say, well, I can't control it. It's a bad habit, I know. and we get ourselves out of it, as it were. This is where the lack of responsibility comes in. So thoughts, words, and actions. As the mind becomes more collected, more stable, more serene, the heart isn't that agitated. And if it is agitated, you're cognizant that it is agitated. You're aware that it is agitated. Hence the need for us to become mindful throughout all the various different actions and activities. Not just when we're sitting. Not just when we're sitting. And as we're becoming more cognizant, we see that behind each action or each thought or each emotion or each intention to say something, the drive to do something, there is this almost transparent but very present delusion or anger or resentment or lust. It's very strong, but it somehow has this invisibility cloak, which doesn't allow it to be seen. Yet, it definitely drenches us in that particular mindset or emotional state. So it's almost like that hand that goes into a glove. The glove itself, if we take it as a metaphor for speech, or a particular concept that we like to entertain, or a physical activity that we're engaging in. So whether it's delusion, lust, or hatred, or anger, it is that hand that's gone inside the glove, and all you're seeing is the glove. It might have the shape or form of your digits, a palm, fingers, a thumb, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a mitten, or it could be some other object. But the thing that is moving it is working in disguise. And that threefold, if you will, thought, speech, and action, attitude that we have in life becomes our own behavior, which we tend to call, this is me, this is who I am, this is my personality. I can't change this, this is who I am. I'm used to doing this way. I'm used to saying these things, etc. So as you see, there's a lot going on. You don't have to go outside of yourself to learn this Dhamma or that. There's a lot going on just within ourselves. So much. But we cannot possibly know any part of this or be completely lacking in our understanding of the mechanism that's taking place underneath it all. So long as the mind is not calmed down. And if there's an umbrella term to describe it, it is the non-agitation of the mind. The Buddha had different words for this. Samadhi was one that he officially termed it. That state of stability of mind, collectedness of mind. There's a sense of openness, but it reveals everything that's going on. Nothing escapes it. Nothing escapes it. So long as it has panya with it, however. Panya. But how can we get the mind to be that calm, that stable, that collected? For that, Lord Buddha instituted the very important factor of his teachings, namely Sila. The thing that is absolutely required. We cannot go around it. It's not a punishment at all. It's not persecuting oneself or others at all. But it is simply a mechanism of protection. Protection of one's mind. Inner peace. So that we can open the door for collectedness of mind to take place, the stability of mind, the tranquility to take place, where wisdom can take place. And meanwhile, as we are adhering to these training rules, Sila, whether they're the 5 or more precepts, we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting the environment around us, the people in our lives, society, our neighbors, the future, from any stupidity that the delusion, lust, or anger could drive us into manifesting through our behavior. Basically, this is what today's society at large in the world is desperately lacking in. Sila. Perhaps more so than ever in our documented human history. Again, we have to be cautious not to go outside to fix the world's apostrophe S, Sila. Sila starts with one's own self, with one's own work on oneself. So does Samadhi. So we have Sila, Samadhi, and the third one is Panya. These are the 3 trainings that are necessary to get rid of one's own suffering. Again, we're back here. We didn't leave. We're still here with ourselves, tending to our wounds, tending to our ignorance, tending to the nature of my angry thoughts, for example. So if I'm about to say something to someone, pausing a millisecond prior to allowing those words to spill out like a Niagara out of my lips, and just pausing for a millisecond and saying, I wonder if there is a little bit or a lot of hatred there, dosa. Or what I'm about to say, does that come from a place of ignorance, delusion? Delusion of what? Delusion of myself, the mind being absent, lacking in wisdom, basically. Another way of looking at it is, would someone whom I consider to be wiser than myself, if they were able to see my thoughts right now before they turn into words, or before they turn into actions, or even the very presence of the thought itself. If there were wise individuals, why don't we bring in Lord Buddha? If Lord Buddha was here, present, and he was privy to my thoughts, would I find that to be, just him seeing my thoughts, would that be uncomfortable? At the very least. Well, there you have it. We're already not proud of having that thought. So the hand is revealing itself from underneath the glove, suddenly. So much of our speech today in the world, anywhere you go around the world, it stinks of hatred. Stinks. There's such a strong stench of anger there. But we make it so, we embellish it. We add things to it. Add words, a lot of adjectives. Lots and lots of adjectives. Fancy words, but it still stinks. It has a horrible odor. Which leaves us in a state of pain, suffering. But now it's not just us who's suffering, but also the recipient of those hurtful, hatred-filled words. Because it burns, those words burn wherever they land. Wherever they land. And similarly with the body, the gaze that we use to look at someone. We can express so much through our facial muscles, our bodily language, the way we express ourselves. We can show contempt, we can show love, we can show acceptance without saying a single word. We know these things. We know them viscerally because we've been recipients of these different expressions. But I cannot control someone else's expressions, that's for sure. What I can control are the gates from which these three aspects of thought, word, and action can come out and meet the world. This again puts a totally different nuance on our understanding of responsibility. Responsibility. After all, if we're being wisely reflective, applying wise attention, yoniso manasikara, then we'll constantly be, and more as we practice it, more so every day, cognizant, aware of, is this thought or this stream of thoughts, concepts that I'm having, that I'm constructing, sankharas, are they really taking me to Nibbana? You don't have to say it out loud, just to yourself. Say it in your heart. No one has to know. And then make the decision whether you want to go through with it or not. This very intriguing, if I don't say it, all hell's gonna break loose type of a sentence, if it's discovered for what it is, where it's coming from, and I hold it in and just put the spotlight of wisdom on it, and I could withstand that pressure from within, that in itself becomes the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught for 45 years, because we have now understood the presence of suffering, and we also understood the cause of suffering, which is our attachment to wanting to say it. Why? Because there is ignorance underneath. I don't want to do this. I want to let it out. I want to release this pressure. But seeing this for what it is allows us suddenly to experience Nirodha, instead of going about it the wrong way, which is a release of pressure. After all, when we're angry, it escalates, it layers. The layers of onion become thicker and wider and bigger, the strata. And suddenly there is, just like in the case of an earthquake, the more pressure there is, the bigger the devastating impact. It's similar with sexual energy or anger. It just needs to come out. But what is the person seeking really with the release of this energy? It is the release of the tension that is due to the upadana, the craving, the grasping onto something. And what I've noticed in my own practice is that the more there are these instances of, you know what, I got this. I'm not going to spend extra time being mindful of this process taking place in me. The more there are these episodes where we are being basically neglectful of tending to the non-agitated, tranquil state of mind, the layers are piling up one over the other. And suddenly we don't know where this anger came from, and we just spew out this horrendous series of expressions or action. And then we spend a few hours or a lifetime regretting it. Well, that's where we have agitation of mind, remorse, uddacha, kukucha, restlessness, and remorse, the worrisome aspect. Hindrances that are very, very powerful. So in other words, we need to protect. There's been many, many tools that Lord Buddha has given us, and the Arya Savakas, the Arahants, and the noble disciples over this course of centuries have provided for us through the example of their lives, that we can always tap into and use. But here's where the laboratory is, not outside. It's always here. Always asking, is this thought that I feel like it's the best thought ever in the whole human history that I'm having between my ears, is it really that outstanding, or is it simply another manifestation of delusion? Or is this thought coming from hatred, anger, resentment, I don't like you attitude? Or is it a combination, meaning lust? Is it lustful? Is it greed oriented? Is it desiring something terribly? Asking ourselves, okay, is this thought, this word, this action going to take me to Nibbana? And a truly wonderful thing happens if we're being honest, and the mind is becoming more and more trusting of oneself. The heart is being listened to by the person. And the person discovers that if they were led by these three, lust, hatred, and delusion, then they're definitely not taking the person to Nibbana. I am reminded of a story I once heard of an old bhikkhu living in the forest. Skinny, rather on the shorter height range, shorter stature physically. And he had been practicing diligently for many years. So one night he's sleeping and there's a thunderstorm going on. And he's just taking a nap for, after having meditated all night. So he's just resting his body, his old body. And he's not yet an arahant, but he's working towards it. So at night, he feels rather weird. Strange sensations come up that wake him up, actually, that he feels whereby he feels his legs becoming more and more constricted, as if blood is not rushing through them. He's feeling numb, tingly. And he somehow manages to light his lamp to see what's going on. And he looks down and he sees that there's a huge python swallowing him from the feet up. And the story went something like this. So the snake has gone up. It's probably a boa constrictor or something, but it's a larger snake, but he's very small apparently. And he had opened the snake had opened its mouth and has gone up all the way to his knees and now towards his waist. So he's halfway in. The bhikkhu, the old bhikkhu, observes his mind, his heart, to see if it's panicking. And if it was, he settles it, collects his mind, and with clear comprehension, sati sampajanya, turns towards the snake and says, "Brother snake, if you promise me that you'll take me straight to Nibbana, then go ahead, swallow me whole. But if you're not going to take me to Nibbana, then you're just going to end up in a lot of trouble because you're going to be killing a student of Lord Buddha. And that's a heavy, heavy burden. But," he says, "please go ahead and eat me if you're going to take me to Nibbana." Well, the snake realizes this is one meal I rather not complete. And he starts pulling its body back out, allowing the bhikkhu to get his legs back. And he walks away, slithers away. This story has always impressed me deeply. Can you take me to Nibbana? If yes, by all means, here's my hand, take it. I'll follow you. And that is what happened with countless beings who came to Lord Buddha to learn, not just to learn to add information, to add prestige. There were lots and lots of people who were doing that, yes. But the ones who really wanted an ending of suffering came because they felt in their hearts that your teachings can take me to Nibbana. They saw the validity of the teachings and how real they were, how easily verifiable and valid in their results. So there was no question. All that was needed was their trust in the process and in their participation in their own freedom, in their own release, which is absolutely essential, which allows the heart to open up and trust the process and really go deep in one's practice, really go deep in one's understanding and appreciation of Sila. You won't be doing Sila to show off to someone else that you are practicing the 5 or the 8 or the 10 precepts. It's never about others, it's about you. Constantly being cognizant, aware of my thoughts, words, and actions. Are they led by something other than what I want to attribute to them? Meaning, are they led by lust, hatred, and delusion. And the moment we shed some light on that, things become a lot easier, clearer, and we see things for what they really are. And for that, we don't need a multitude of Dhamma teachings to memorize or to know by heart. That is what I would like to share with you today. And I'll pause here for questions, comments.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yes.
This is Russell. I like the story about the python. It reminded me quite a number of years ago. I was near my house, and a kid with a baseball bat came up to me and said, "You know, give me your money or change." So I look at him, and then I said, "Okay, you can see that I'm wearing shorts and I'm not carrying money right now, and you should find someone else or just wait here and someone will come along." So I just I turned my back, I walked away, and he didn't follow me. Of course, that's not a good story as the python, but still I will remember that. My question was, a lot of times in your talks you talk about, you know, different actions and so forth. And when I was growing up, I grew up as a Christian. They always talk about the sin of omission. I mean, there's many things you can do, you know, or actions, but then there's also the sin of, well, just because I use that, learned that word, the sin of omission, of sort of not doing something or not doing the right thing or letting something go. Say, you know, you're walking by the river and somebody is drowning, and you just, oh, okay, and you just walk. You just walk. So I'm just wondering, what's the connection between? I think it's probably a more of a, you know, language thing, but is there such thing as sort of sin of omission type of equivalent in Buddhism? That's my question.
Oh, yes. We don't have the concept of sin in the Dhamma at all. Of course, over centuries, as it went to different parts of the world, it has taken some attributes. Still, I wouldn't call them sin per se, but as far as I'm not interested in those branches of Buddhism at all, but I'm just focused on the Dhamma as far as was taught by Lord Buddha. But in relation to the word sin, the very basis of, for example, the 12 links of causal relation, the Paticca Samuppada, even though we can't say that it starts here per se, because it's a circle, it's a round circle, but for the sake of convenience and the logic behind it also, I would say, it starts with ignorance. So I would draw that, if there is a similarity with that. So ignorance, however, we don't stop there in Buddhism. Now I'm trying to go deeper into the omission, quote unquote, that you mentioned, that is found in what you were taught earlier in your life. That sounds very much like the absence of metta. The absence of metta. And of course, the rest of the Brahma Viharas, which are huge in the Dhamma. So a person who has omission, if I may, is a person who has omitted the presence of Dhamma. The Dhamma is omitted from their heart, their mind. I've heard from a friend of mine who I'm not going to name the country where he went, but he was there teaching English, and it's a big country in the world. Um, the other part of the world where I am, and he was there for many years, and he had students, and he was teaching university students English. And one day they had gone to a picnic, and there was this bridge close by. So they were having this picnic. So he's the only Caucasian there. And his students who love him and respect him over the years are having lunch with their teacher, their professor. And suddenly someone falls into the water, into the river, and he's drowning and he's calling for help. Now, the students who were standing, as well as the public that are now gathering around the bank of the river, or I don't know if it was high up, too high up from the ground or whatever, but basically they could see him, they could hear him, but nobody is doing anything. And even worse, they are not even exhibiting facial expressions that would indicate a level of concern for another human being or for another being. Now, this I learned also from the body language years later from this friend of mine that was relating the story to me, to the point where it became so intolerable for him that he took out whatever he had, wallet or whatever, in his pocket, because he urged some of his students who were closer to jump to help. And they said, no, no, we can't. And then he jumps into the water. I know the person, I know his last name, I know, he's a very reputable and very impeccable person as far as trustworthiness. He jumps in and he saves the person, pulls them out, and his students, guess what they do? They rush around him, they dry him, and they pull him away from the scene. They say, why did you do that? Are you crazy? Now you're going to get in trouble. Being a foreigner trying to help someone, you're not supposed to do something like that. They put him in a car or whatever the transportation was, and they leave. But this completely shocked him to the point where he had contempt and resentment towards these people that he loved, to the point where he actually started planning to leave the country that he was living in for over a decade at that time. And he did leave. And he said to me that he never wants to go back. So, just basic human values. I don't need somebody coming over and telling me, oh, well, that's a mission. We need to develop as human beings first. Yes, the religion can have tools to give us, but the practice has to be coming from the person to the point where they develop and understand, and they stop being so careless, which is another word for delusion, self-centeredness, narcissism. Narcissism is another source, I would say. If there's a source for the concept of a mission, I would say there is narcissism before we get to ignorance. And that's something that we have a lot of today in the world. So narcissism or ignorance, or in this case, the way you interpreted the word omission, have no place in the Dhamma. They cannot coexist with the Dhamma. As far as I understand the Dhamma. I don't know if I was able to answer your question.
Yes, it's quite clear, but the example you just gave sounds very much like China, because I'm Chinese, and the thing is, I think that perhaps the students value the teacher, this foreign teacher, on this sort of social hierarchy, and culturally, okay, one student and their foreign teacher who they loved, I guess, So, I mean, it's kind of interesting that, you know, that this should happen in a place like, well, you didn't say the country, but I'm Chinese, so I think I've heard the story, actually, a similar type of story where this non-Chinese kind of jumps and saves, you know, somebody in the river, actually. But, you know, maybe, you know, I can appreciate your story, but, you know, maybe it's a cultural thing. I mean, I have not to excuse the Chinese, but maybe they are coexisting values in a way, or different worlds. You know, I mean, I don't know. Besides the Buddhist world, is there any other world that could coexist with it that has different antithetical values? I don't know. It's not a question. I'm just, you know, thinking about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, of course. The example we also get from the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the loving kindness sutta, that is often chanted weekly, if not daily, in temples and by practitioners in the world, says clearly, looking upon the other, especially one that can be considered an enemy, let's say, as if just like a mother would, a loving mother would look upon her only son, with those loving eyes to look upon each other. So that quality that the Buddha uses, the image of a mother towards loving towards her only son, that's, I think it goes beyond the bounds of just Buddhism as such. It's in not just cultures on this planet, but in other planets as well, in other states of being, where people or beings resonate with love, through love, by love, which again is today overshadowed by this sense of narcissism and the lack of Sila in the world. You have a lot of people talking about love, but it has nothing to do with love. We've lost our way. And the Dhamma is showing us, helping us to find our way back to what really gives us a sense of fulfillment, Because most of us, in fact, we don't even have to go to outward towards this enemy somewhere to practice or to give our metta to, in fact. Most of us have tremendous sense of resentment and hatred towards ourselves. Imagine that. People have such a hard time forgiving themselves. I see this both as a teacher and also as a psychotherapist with patients. It's so hard for people to relinquish that hatred towards themselves, even though they want love. So we need to be, aware of these things and go beyond narrow ways of looking at this culture, this religion, or whatever, because you find a lot of even a lack of metta within people who talk about metta or even teach metta. I've come across a few myself over the years, but that only leads me back to myself and see, okay, fine. You say, Mr. This person is lacking in metta. Fine. Show me otherwise. Go ahead and see if you can bring up that love that the Lord Buddha was talking about and manifest it to this person who just verbally abused you, hurt you. And then I recall a statement from the simile of the saw that the Lord Buddha talks about. I think it's, I forgot the Pali name for it, but it's a simile of the saw in the suttas. And the Buddha says, even if You have two individuals using a, lumber cutting, those huge saws, the two-handed ones. The two people have to, actually four-handed. They're using that saw on you, cutting you in half. Even in that moment, if you entertain any thoughts of hatred, then you're not practicing my teaching. I'm still working towards that. It's a powerful image. An image that compels me to come back to myself and work on this person here in the mirror. So I hope that helps. Good. I was reminded of another story, if there are no questions or comments. The Jataka stories, these are later editions, most of which are, actually have nothing to do with the Dhamma. They've been taken from different traditions, different religions, different cultural stories, etc., over the course of centuries, and included into this several volumed text we call the Jataka tales, or the Jataka, the previous births of Lord Buddha. But there are some that even Lord Buddha mentions during his course of teaching for 45 years. There's one sutta that really stands out for me at this point. And it is about the Monkey King. They say that Lord Buddha in his past lives, again, this could be just, something from a different religion or something, but it's accepted within the tradition at this point. So the king of the monkeys, a large-bodied monkey, was one day roaming around in his territory in the forest. And then he hears this crying sound, this sound that's very different. It's not the sound of a monkey or a tiger or an elephant or a lion or any animal. And he gets closer and closer. And he sees that there's this pit, this large pit, that this two-legged, this biped human had fallen into. This Brahmin, in fact, had fallen into. And he was now crying that no one's going to know that where he's at, and he's going to die there, and he's never going to be able to see his loved ones. And the monkey goes, well, before I promise you anything, he says, I need to come down and check you out. And he goes down to the bottom of the pit and he sees this human and he measures his back and sees, He grabs onto a big, large piece of rock, almost a boulder, and starts carrying it on its back and starts climbing. Then he says, I think I can do this. And he throws the rock down and he says, come on, climb on my back. I'm going to pull you out of here. And the Brahmin says, wow, really? He says, yes, come on, climb on my back. Being a monkey, he has no trouble, but the man is heavy, but with some struggling, he reaches to the edge of the cliff. And as now the monkey is so tired, the Monkey King is so tired physically. And he says, could you do me a favor? Could you just make sure everything's safe? I'm just gonna lay down here and just rest for 5 minutes. Could you watch over us? He says, sure. So the Brahmin sits there and the monkey has his head on the lap of this Brahmin, human. And the man thinks, well, I told my wife and kids that I was gonna go and get them some food or something. But if I go back now, I'm going to go empty-handed. Well, look at this. There's a monkey here. And apparently in those days, they would eat the monkey. And he says, you know what? He's sleeping. He's unconscious. So let me just take this rock and kill it. And he takes the rock and slams the head of this monkey with that piece of rock repeatedly, to the point where the monkey, it's a large monkey, just wakes up and it says, whoa, whoa. And he's bleeding now. He says, what happened? He says, I'm so sorry, but I just thought about this and I didn't want to go empty-handed to my house. And the monkey is bleeding. And the man starts to run because he's afraid of the consequences. He gets lost in the jungle. It's a dense jungle. And the monkey calls out and says, hey, hold on. Where are you going? You can't get out of here. I'll take you to your house, he says. He says, why don't you just follow my path as I lead you to your village? Why don't you go ahead and follow the trail of the blood I'll leave behind as I take you to your home? And by the time he gets there, the monkey dies. Now, in our own 21st century standards, this sounds beyond over the top. It's different, it's unusual, it's weird, it takes self-sacrifice to another level. The Buddha was not encouraging for people to do this, of course. This is a later addition. But I found this to be an interesting story in my own practice, to kind of encourage me and help me in those areas of my life and my practice where I need more work to be done. So, and there's plenty of that as we incorporate metta. And it's not trying to cover up something. It's an extension of one's own capacity of growth. And it's a fuller experience of living. So being generous is a wonderful attribute to have, which this Brahmin, this human, did not have an iota of. He was completely lost in his narcissistic world, which I find him to be more commonplace. He can actually fit into our world right now beautifully, but not the monkey, if he were anthropomorphized, if he were a human being. We have more room for that type of Brahmin, that type of beings today in the world, which is a major cause of concern, source of suffering, something that definitely the Dhamma helps with removing. But we can't remove someone else. We have to remove it from within us. I don't know if this kind of made some of you have ideas, concept, thoughts that you might share, or questions. Before I forget, I wanted to also repeat here how sometimes I get donations from some of you here and other listeners whom I don't know, and I must apologize for not getting back to each and every one of you in showing my appreciation. As a bhikkhu, I'm not supposed to say thank you, but I can say I am very appreciative, and I accept your gifts on behalf of the Triple Gem, Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So it goes far, your donations. However, please forgive me if I don't send emails or messages to show you my appreciation. So I wanted to include that here as well. Yes?
Thanks very much for the talk, Bhante.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd just like to add that nowadays many teachers teach about metta and give a lot of emphasis on loving kindness and stuff like that. But if I understand the Dhamma correctly, metta is first and foremost the absence of ill will. I mean, that has to be the starting point. Is this understanding correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For this reason, I try to emphasize how it's not a verbal engagement, metta. Yes, we do have, in our tradition, for example, in Buddhism, in Theravada Buddhism specifically, we have pages upon pages of may I be well, may my friends be well, may my neighbors be well, may my enemies be well, may they be happy, etc. These are lovely affirmations, if you will, but I don't consider them to be the starting point or even midpoint. These are just manifestations when the heart is already brimming with metta. The cup is full and it's overflowing with metta. That's when the words can come out and they can flow, and not the other way around. It's like saying to someone, I love you, trying to cross your fingers and saying, okay, I hope this is really gonna be a preamble, like a prelude for more love, or to have love to appear in my heart in the first place. So if I say this again and again, so basically fake it until you make it type of a thing. And that is not metta, the way I understand it, the way I teach it. Can I have a gaze of kindness? Can I have a word or a statement, a phrase that I could tell myself that comes from metta? And it doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles of metta, loving kindness, the Brahma Vihara, the first one. No, it could be as simple as saying, I give myself the permission to, and you can add to that. I give myself the permission to smile more, for example. I give myself the permission to not worry for 1 minute in a day. Not to worry. I give myself the permission to not become anxious every time my phone rings, expecting the worst. I give myself the permission to smile at myself when I look in the mirror without looking for reasons to have that happen in the first place. Because it's it takes a while for some of us to ease our way into that state of metta. It doesn't happen naturally. For some of us, we've had very traumatizing childhoods. Or we've lived in, I've been parts of the world where it's very unusual when they see you smile. Or when you reach your hand and you're smiling and say, hi, how are you? With a big smile on your face. It's unusual because they were taught all throughout their lives to be suspicious about not just someone who doesn't speak their language or looks different, but just be suspicious about everything. I've told people, I've said to people, good morning. And I've had sometimes comebacks like, what for? Why do you say good morning? What's good about this morning? Whoa. And it's only been like an hour and a half since this person probably woke up that morning. So yes, the person has to have the quality of it where the mind lacks ill will. Ill will is a term. Vyapada, for example, is a term, or hatred sometimes called, or anger is a term, but it's more than a term. when we're talking about our living experiences, because we need to find resonance between these words and teachings that the Lord Buddha gave and our own lives. A resonance in meaning, not frequency in this case, but meaning. Does this statement that Lord Buddha is making here in this verse or in this wherever, does it resonate with my life? Is it real as far as I'm concerned? And from there to come with the understanding of what metta could mean for me. In teaching loving kindness meditation, the way I've been taught, sometimes students have a difficulty to conjure up a spiritual friend to whom to send loving kindness to. They don't know what that looks like. They don't know what love is. The other day I was guiding someone overseas, and he was having a difficulty finding someone that he could call, yeah, I could send love to, but there's no love to send. So I asked something like this, could you feel good? Could you feel good when you're relaxed? How does that feel when you're relaxed? When you go on a vacation, what is it that you're after? I'm trying to narrow at least a tiny little segment of his living experience where that could be the entry point of what will turn into metta. Because it's not just individual cases, but the whole world. There's a lot of vyapada, there's a lot of ill will. So I don't, my concern always has been not to give lip service to metta, which I see a lot of. The first retreat I did years ago on metta, I'm trying to use a lot of that, the black marker to black out details. But the most important part of what I want to share here is in context, in the context of what we're discussing, is what Upatissa, you just mentioned, that sometimes even with metta teachers, we need to be cognizant, careful. And here I was, 5th day or 6th day of the retreat, really having a blast, really going deep and enjoying different areas and avenues of the mind, more so than I've ever done at that time, I've experienced at the time. And everything the eyes look at is just being drenched with metta. And suddenly, I was faced with a situation where it was like a cold shower. If you were standing in the middle of the desert in Joshua Tree in the summer, how would that feel suddenly? That's how it felt, because I was now in the presence of someone who was supposed to be doing, we were both there among other people, supposedly doing metta retreat, intensive. And this person was full of hatred, While the teacher was also saying that, oh, this person is advancing very well. So I couldn't, make heads or tails with that, because it was just mind-boggling. Later on, I confronted the teacher. I said, I expressed my concern, and he didn't know what to say. This is not a judgment or critique of anyone, other than we need to be very alert as to what it is that we're doing. And this is another reason why I mentioned a few weeks ago how our own anticipations, or in this case, overestimation of our so-called attainments or experiences can really do a number on us. This is not something new, because this really happened even at the time of Lord Buddha. He had a term for this, overestimation. He called it Dhamma Uddhacha. Dhamma Uddhacha. The restlessness is there, right? But the way these two words are put together, and in the context of what Lord Buddha was saying, it's basically the person is telling themselves that they have advanced in metta. Meanwhile, their lives do not demonstrate this at all. So please don't give yourself lip service. I don't care if you're a student of so many decades or a teacher of metta. They're popping all over the place nowadays. It's the new thing. Fine, beautiful, but at least let us embody that. And for that, we also have the Vimansaka Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. Vimansaka Sutta is the discourse on investigation, where Lord Buddha even puts himself under the microscope, under the magnifying glass, permitting us, his students, to scrutinize the teacher, capital T, as well as everyone else who follows. Anyone who claims to be a teacher. He says, make sure you don't agree or disagree, but first you go ahead and have a firsthand understanding of this person's behavior closely. If a person says, well, I don't like fame, keep the fame away from me. I don't want to become a celebrity, renowned, this and that. He says, don't agree or disagree, don't approve or disapprove. Wait a little while until this person gets or gains some notoriety, some fame, some celebrity status, and then go ahead and peek in a little bit. See how he or she is doing. Live with them if you can, he says, for a few months, for 6 or 7 months. Closely observe them. But that's something that we have stopped doing for some reason. I don't know why. We are dying to make people our gurus, our teachers, whether in this color robe or jackfruit robe, color robe, or this tradition or that tradition. It really doesn't matter. We've relinquished our responsibility to scrutinize, to look carefully as to who it is that I am taking faith in. Like, I believe it was Princess Sumana. She came asking Lord Buddha, who is it that I'm supposed to take refuge in? Who is it? What is it in reference to the Dhamma? Who are these people that I'm taking refuge in reference to the Sangha? And the Buddha gives a beautiful description. But it behooves upon us to take the responsibility of doing some investigative work, vimansaka. Instead of just giving everything to the teacher and saying, yes, yes, I accept you, and then having issues later on. Again, there is an element of vyapada wherever you go, throughout. Because that giving, relinquishing of resources of your time as a student to a particular teacher, etc., all these will backfire in time because there will be the sense of resentment, either because you're not progressing or because you're seeing certain anomalies that don't make sense, like the teacher's behavior. You have to always compare it to if no one else is found, to at least the example of Lord Buddha. That has to be there. That has to be there. Because you have teachers today that they think that they are beyond scrutiny. They shouldn't be scrutinized by students. And one time it happened where I had to help the teacher by reminding him of the importance of the Vimansaka Sutta and how I have the permission from Lord Buddha himself as we all do. So please do not worship any teachers, any, and come back to what the metta, whether metta is there or not. And if it is not, you can even just, I've done this with patients, for example, just gently caressing your hand. Or sometimes even a person who's never had someone kiss them when they were children. If you can, to even go and kiss your hand. No one has to be watching. Simply to generate that soft experience of love with yourself. And lots could happen from that. Just gentle expression, the gesture with yourself. Because there's a moment of intimacy, truthful, kind, gentle, kind, warm, warm. And these are things that they cannot coexist with vyapada or ill will. So absolutely, ill will cannot be there, cannot coexist if we're trying to generate metta. So I hope that answers your question.
Bhante, I'd just like to add something on a more personal note for myself. When I realize that metta has to have an absence of ill will, is the thought that where does the ill will come from? And I've given that some thought, and always ill will is an aversion on my part. Aversion always comes from me. It comes from within and preconceived ideas that I've got. So one of the things I found that helps me feel metta for other people, and Bhante Vimalaramsi is big on telling people to do forgiveness. And I always found that hard because I got, okay, I forgive people, I let it go. But when I feel aversion, it's because of that preconceived idea I have that someone should be a certain way or they shouldn't be a certain way, and things should work in a certain way, and they haven't. And that's when I feel anger and aversion and ill will. So it really helps to start, when we're being mindful, to be mindful of forgiveness, that everybody's differences, it's okay for them to be different, and I need to forgive them for being different in the first place. And I also then need to forgive myself for thinking that they should be different and causing all that ill will to come up. So for me, metta starts with being mindful of forgiveness and tolerance first. And when I forgive and I'm tolerant first, then the ill will really arises far less often. So whilst we have to have an absence of ill will, we have to figure out how to not have ill will in the first place. Just suppressing it doesn't work. Forgiveness is a way to, for me, to stop that ill will arising.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that, because you use the word, Greg, suppressing is not the way. Yes, absolutely. But another way of saying, may I be happy, may you be happy, is another form of suppression. Suppressing of what? Suppressing of what is opposite of metta, which is ill will, which is there, which I'm trying to squeeze it out. I'm trying to get rid of it. And having that tolerance that you mentioned is an absolute must. But to whom? Towards whom first? The fact that I'm suppressing, okay. What does that mean? That means I need to lay low. I need to pull back a little bit. I need to pull back because there's too much energy, too much virya in one direction. Ajahn Mahabua says it beautifully when he says, sometimes our desire for attainment, of attaining Nibbana, the fruits of Nibbana, is so strong that we want to ignore completely the value of wisdom that needs to take place. The value of wisdom that needs to take place. what is Nibbana after all? Because most of the time, you know, I've come across students who just want to reach a certain jhana. Now, actually, during the past 10 years, it's very passé. The jhanas are very passé. Now everybody wants to attain, which is a noble thing, I think. But why? I ask people, why do you want to become an arahant? Why do you want to become an anagami? I just, you know, I'm curious. So oftentimes people don't know the mechanics of it and what it is that this thing represents. Why am I practicing metta? Really? Because I don't want to dangle any cookies or carrots on a stick, you know, to get someone, because people can do this very well. And they do this very well thanks to this thing of suppression. And there is a schism that happens in the mind of the person. There is this fighting constantly. Yes, I could say, go ahead and do forgiveness. Forgiveness, yes, forgive yourself. It's like somebody who's tense and you say, relax. Oh, that is the worst thing you could tell them. They might come at you now with an axe. So even when I have the urge to tell them, apply forgiveness, I need to observe how to deliver it and give examples that they can relate with. Something simple. I use the body, for example. The body, I observe. If the person is sitting tight, their toes are curled under as they're squeezing their feet down, their weight on the feet, or their hands are clasping the knees, pushing the legs down, or the tension in the neck. As a teacher, I'm supposed to observe all these things and ask them about it and use one area and say, can you relax this? Usually what it would be something like is this. Can you tighten it up? Really, really tight. Exaggerate it. And then suddenly let go of it. How does that feel? There cannot be any room left for suppression there, because the person for once is now feeling relinquishing, letting go. What I've mentioned several times, patinisagga, taking up, giving up. So as a person does more and more of these small activities, they develop a tolerance first, not towards someone else or their expectations of someone else. They first need to cocoon themselves from the world and just focus on this person and work on this, because I can only work on my muscles here, muscles of tolerance, and then I can extend it to you and everyone. How is this, by the way, what I'm sharing? Is this resonating? Is this helping? Good. In therapy, there is this intervention. Tools are called interventions. Techniques are called intervention. Fancy word, but basically things that people can use when they're not with me. Because they see me, let's say, if they were to see me once a week, that leaves them with 6 days and 23 hours plus. What are they doing during those hours? I'm very curious. That's where it really matters. Just like with the person who does 1 hour of metta and they have 23 hours of, I want to kill this bastard mentality when they see somebody on the TV or whatever. Well, where's the metta then? So coming back to the intervention, there's this one particular tool or intervention that I've been a big fan of, and it comes from a school of family therapy. I'm not going to get into the technicalities, but what it is it's called a paradoxical intervention. So paradoxical. So whatever the person is trying to get rid of, you have them be saturated with it, with their permission. Meaning, if somebody says, I cannot fall asleep at night at all. I toss and turn, and you check and you see that they don't drink caffeine, they're not watching TV up until late hours, all these things. But guess what? The person still can't fall asleep. So what you do is you basically say, okay, when do you go to bed? Let's say at 11 or 10. Fine. After you've tossed and turned for about half an hour, and you saw that you're not going to fall asleep and your, insomnia is there, come out of bed, put on your clothes, go downstairs and vacuum the whole entire house. And if that's not enough, do the dishes again. If that's not enough, take out every plate, every piece of cutlery and wash them and wipe them clean, dry, put them back into their place. Guess what? Within less than 2 days, the person is sleeping like a baby. This is called paradoxical. I mean, there's so many variations of how to use them. But this is a way of giving it to you, just to share it with you rather, where you can probably apply it. Okay, this person, I think he is just the worst scum of the universe. Okay. Okay, let me just dedicate 5 seconds or 5 minutes where I can barrage this person with insults in my head. Okay, and I'm going to write down all these things. Take a notepad, start writing. Or things, let's forget about some other people, just ourselves. Like you pointed out, we have this very low image of ourselves often, where we have a difficulty forgiving ourselves. Well, this is something I personally have done over the years. And what I did was basically get a notepad and just write down all the things that I firmly believe in, have believed in, and have been told and been taught. You're this, you're too tall, you're this. You have an underbite, you have this. These are things that I would hear growing up from siblings, from, I once had a person say, oh, you know too much. That's your problem. I said, okay. So I add those things to the list. And after about a few pages, something interesting happens to the brain. It starts saying, excuse me, hold on. I have evidence that proves otherwise. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Suddenly, out of the blue, you find resiliency coming up. You find, in fact, agency within you, sprouting, blossoming, where you start to cheer yourself, if you will. You start to advocate for yourself in a healthy way, based on facts, with evidence. So this is like one of the things that I also recommend. Instead of saying to someone, well, you need to forgive yourself, because anyone could say that. Using tools like this, definitely it needs to be in your toolbox, if you will, of addressing. And that's why Lord Buddha taught for so many years the same thing over and over and over again, to simply help, maybe say it this way, can get this person to really taste the Dhamma. Because we all learn in different ways because of our experiences and dispositions based on so many conditions and circumstances. So I'll pause, and if there are any more questions, I'll address them. But if not, then I think we'll close it today. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sad, sad. May the Dhamma that was shared with you go a long way. May it send down its roots May it resonate with you, make you more curious about yourself, life, experiences, and momentary consciousnesses that keep happening again and again and again, so that you could shed some light. A spotlight is placed on these thoughts, words, and actions to reveal what is behind them, whether there is lust, whether there is ill will or hatred behind them, or whether there is delusion. May your personal experiments be fruitful in the Dhamma. And I'll see you next week. Be well, be safe.